Good morning, YouTube. Today, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Ferrari clutches. Yeah.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, and we are at my dealership, NG Supercars, and today, we're going to talk about my favorite thing, Ferraris. Actually, Ferrari clutches. And well, unfortunately, Ferrari clutches have a lot of myths out there. Some of it's true, some of it's not so true. We're going to go through various different examples of clutches that go in different cars. So we're going to talk about the early clutches versus the later clutches versus the much later clutches. So hopefully at the end of this video you have a good idea and can be more knowledgeable about clutches in the various different Ferrari models. Okay, so the first thing to know is that most of the earlier Ferraris have a single disc clutch. So there's no like hard rule that says if it was before this date it's a single disc clutch, and if it's after this date it's a dual disc clutch, because there were some interspersed dual disc clutch early on. But anyway, we're gonna kind of use the 430 and 360 and 458 as our example cars because, well, they're the most common things that we sell and that we know the most about. So on the 360 has a single disc clutch. So what does that mean? Well, here is the single disc clutch. This one is actually blown up. We'll talk about that in a second. So that means that right here there's a front and a back of this single plate. So this side of the plate will actually be touching the flywheel. This side of the plate touches the clutch itself. There are the springs that actually grab on the clutch. This is the transmission or the flywheel side, and flip it over. Got it dirty. This is the side that faces the throwout bearing. So the transmission would be on this side. The shaft of the transmission would be coming out this way. So 360 single disc clutch tends to last maybe a little bit less than the 430, but they should last typically pretty close to somewhere in the 30 to 40,000 mile range. Now obviously if you have an F1 transmission and it wasn't programmed right, it's going to probably last closer to like 20 to 30,000 miles, especially if it had a lot of slipping. A manual transmission car should get closer to 40,000 miles. While we have this out, I want to show you this. Right here, the clutch blew up. So right here, you can see that piece was supposed to be there. And this is why you can't always trust the computers. And we'll go in and show you how to read the clutch life and all that stuff. And everyone always wants to know, what's the clutch life? What's the clutch life? Well, the clutch life doesn't tell you everything, because the clutch life on this car said it was like about 40% remaining or something, somewhere in that range. But it doesn't tell you that this piece of the clutch had actually shattered. So that had actually caused it to where this was an F1 car, and because this piece was probably jammed like that or something, it could not disengage the clutch fully. So when the throwout bearing was being pushed against the clutch would still be engaged to the transmission, and the car could not shift gears at all. This is obviously a catastrophic failure, and it also shows that this clutch looks like it's in way worse condition than what the computer was saying. To us, this clutch looks like it's got very little material left. So that is the single disc clutch for the 430 or the 360, and of note, they are about $3,000-ish for an OE clutch, just for the clutch. Now, right down here we have, heavy. This is a 430 clutch. Now this one obviously looks to be in much better shape. You can see the clutch material, it's starting to get worn, but it's in good shape. Now this, see there's a platter in the middle and then a platter on the outside, so it's actually a twin disc clutch. So there's two of those platters. It's kind of hard to see. Yeah. So right in there, right in the sandwich, this metal piece right here gets pushed on right there and right here. So those are the two different clutch parts. So the dual disc clutch theoretically does last a little bit longer. Of course, it's more expensive. It's closer to $4,000 for just the OE clutch. But these should last somewhere close to 40,000 miles. Again, assuming the F1 computer was programmed correctly or that the car was being driven right. That doesn't mean that we haven't seen them die in 20,000 miles, but typically 40,000 miles is a pretty good range. They sometimes even last closer to like 50,000 1,000 miles, but that's usually like a manual transmission car that was driven very well. So the third type of clutch is a wet clutch, which is in the dual clutch transmission cars. So like the 458, the California, and the later cars. All of the modern Ferraris after that point all have the dual clutch transmissions, and they have a wet clutch. So those clutches last basically forever. You don't really have to worry about it. In fact, I am unaware of anyone ever having the clutch die on any of those transmissions. From what I understand, actually you can't even just like remove the clutch. It's actually like integrated into the transmission, so it's just something you don't worry about. And I want to point out also, that means there is no clutch readout, like there's no clutch life calculation or any of that sort of stuff. So if you're going to buy a 458 or any of the dual clutch transmission cars and you ask the dealership for a clutch readout, they're going to look at you like you're stupid. Don't do that. It's kind of like when people call us and ask about a 430 and they ask us when was the last time the timing belts were changed, and we kind of go, right. So do your homework, make sure you don't look dumb. I'm just giving you a pro tip here. Don't ask about the clutch life on a dual clutch transmission. Okay, so the next component that's important when talking about clutches is this. This is the throwout bearing, or sometimes called the thrust bearing. Basically, this is what actually engages and disengages the clutch. So it would be facing like this. When hydraulic pressure is applied to it, it will actually push those springs in and out. So this right here, this front face, is actually a bearing. So you can spin it. Ooh. Yeah, this one's starting to go. You can hear some clickety clacks in there. So anytime you're changing out the clutch, you always want to change out the throwout bearing. And there is some misinformation about the throwout bearing. So this is actually a throwout bearing for an F1 system. And the way you can tell that is because right here, this little sensor with the wire is the clutch position sensor. This actually will slide like this, and that tells the computer how much clutch is engaged, the clutch position, the PIS, all those readings all come from this sensor right here. So if this sensor has any sort of trouble, your computer doesn't know what's going on with the clutch. It's a good idea if you're doing an F1 system and you're changing out the throwout bearing and the clutch, you also want to change out the position sensor, because you don't want to have that replaced later on, because now you're talking about removing the transmission to replace this part. This sensor is about $500. These throwout bearings are about $600 or $700. They're actually pretty expensive. The thing to know about these throwout bearings are there are two different throwout bearings. Besides just the position sensor, they have different seals. So see these little bluish green guys? Those are the seals on the throwout bearing. Those seals are designed to work specifically with either brake fluid or hydraulic fluid, and they're not interchangeable. If you use brake fluid on a hydraulic fluid throwout bearing, those seals will fail, and then the throwout bearing will stop working, and you're going to have a mess because they're going to have brake fluid coming out all over the place. Opposite is also true. So basically, you always need to make sure that you're using the right bearing with the right fluid. So it's all about the fluid more so than anything else. You pretty much could actually just remove this sensor right here, and then the rest of the unit is effectively the same except for the seals. Now you can replace the seals theoretically if you got the wrong one, but just get the right one, because you want to replace these anyway whenever you're doing the clutch. So speaking of other things related to while you're in there, if you're going to be changing out the clutch, you also need to change out some other parts like the pilot bearing. So here's your pilot bearing. This bearing sits right in the center of your flywheel. They're not that expensive. I think they're like $30. If you're going to be changing out the clutch, the throwout bearing, all that stuff, change this out. The other thing to change out is the rear main seal. So it's a good idea if you're going to be in there, remove the rear main seal and replace it. Might as well, just in case. It's one of those where it's like, while you're in there, it's not that much more expensive. Just replace it. When you're changing out the throwout bearing, you need to use new, I don't know exactly what they call it, like it's called like the pin or something. Anyway, this piece right here is what the throwout bearing actually slides on. So it sits like this, right? And when the throwout bearing moves in and out, it actually slides along like that.
Shit, yeah, I think it would.
And keeps it in place. Replace those things every time. You need to replace all of the hardware that holds on the clutch. So all the bolts that hold on these clutches is single use. They're torque to yield or whatever, I think that's the right term. That means once you've torqued them down, they're done. You get rid of them if you have to remove them, which sucks because they're actually pretty expensive, especially on the 430. They're like almost $20 a bolt, which there's 8 of them, I think, 8 or 9. And there's 9 of them. So it's like $180, $200 just in bolts. Stupid. Another thing to note is these lines. There are usually 1 or 2 lines on these clutches. That is usually the balance point. Flywheel will also have a balance point, and you're supposed to have the line be opposite the balance point on the flywheel. So if the flywheel's thing was here, you would want this to be down here. Got it? Good. All right, so let's say you're going to go buy a new clutch and you want to replace it. So what are the different options? Well, you kind of have 3 different options available of what to buy. So the first one is, of course, just an OEM clutch. They work fine. They work great. They're pretty expensive. They also last about, like I said, 40,000-ish miles. A second option is that there are aftermarket companies that make clutches, and you can go buy an aftermarket clutch. We haven't really done that so much, but there's a third option, which is you can have a clutch rebuilt. And so we have done that. We've sent our clutches out to Pega Clutch. So with GTE Engineering, they've done a phenomenal job. We're pretty pleased with them. So they actually use like a Kevlar material. It's supposed to last longer. It's supposed to be a little bit grabbier. So they do different materials, so you got options on that. The other thing is they can also resurface the flywheel. So we haven't talked about that yet, but basically, once you remove the clutch, you need to inspect the flywheel and check it for hot spots. If you're going to keep the same flywheel, you probably want to get at least sort of lightly resurfaced to remove any hot spots. You can do that pretty easily by using this little guy right here. I like to call it the dingleberry. They sell them, at like engine shops or whatever, parts stores. Just put it on a drill and you go around it and make sure you kind of smooth out and remove any of the hot spots. But if you want it done really properly, you can send out the flywheel and get it machined. Now, here's the thing. Ferrari says not to do that. Ferrari wants you to replace the flywheel every time. You can choose to do that. It's expensive. But if you want to get it machined, GT Engineering is an option, or you can have it resurfaced yourself. Obviously, this is probably not as good a job as having the pros do it. That's all up to you. Those options are cheaper than OE in almost all cases. And the other thing is they kind of have a pretty quick turnaround if you're sending it out to get remachined. So we're fans of that. We do both things. So when people have us doing a conversion on their car, we kind of leave it up to them. Hey, do you want an OE clutch or do you want it rebuilt? It's up to you. If you want an OE, it costs a little bit more. If you want it rebuilt, it's like $1,000 less or so. Given that the aftermarket clutches and the rebuilt clutches are supposed to last longer and they're slightly cheaper, that seems more appealing to me. I tend to lean towards, let's go with the aftermarket. That's just me. So some other things to note when you're replacing the clutch. Again, you replace the throwout bearing. There's some springs that go on the throwout bearing. It's probably a good idea to replace those. Sometimes they get a little bit worn out. There's some other seals and other hardware you want to replace. So just kind of look at the diagrams, and anything that looks like it's probably going to wear out or whatever, just replace it. It's going to be an expensive job anyway. Already just on the materials and parts and whatever, without any labor, for the OE parts, you're talking like close to $5,000 for a 430 and probably $4,000 for a 360, maybe even a little bit more. So it's a lot of money in just the parts. So that's why I think going with the aftermarket stuff, using the rebuilt versions, saving $1,000, now you're talking like $3,000 and $4,000 instead of $4,000 and $5,000. Starts to be a little bit more appealing. The labor involved is pretty extensive, but if it's incorporated when you're doing something like a conversion, it's not that much more cost. So that's a good time to do it. All right, if you're going to DIY do a clutch, here are some of the special tools that you pretty much have to have. So again, I already showed you the dingleberry. So resurfacing the flywheel, that one's pretty cheap. I think they're like $20, no big deal. This is a must for 430s and 360. This is a special tool that actually installs and removes these guys. So the way it works is it kind of like wraps around, because this would be like kind of wrapping around and getting in there and kind of like doing this sort of thing. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. It takes forever to get these things out, and you strip them about half the time. So don't be like freaking out if you end up just having to cut it with a Dremel. You can just cut that post and then you can get it out with a tool later. But this is a Hill Engineering tool. Right there you can see the part is AV3048. It's not cheap, it's like $250. Another tool that you're gonna need is a clutch alignment tool. So the way this works is it slides right through the clutch and it goes into the pilot bearing like so, whoops, like that. and so then it holds the clutch into place while you tighten the clutch down. And it has this guy right here so that you can screw in a bolt and then get some leverage on it to pull it out, because it kind of sometimes gets stuck in there a little bit. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that the clutch can kind of spin and move freely as you're tightening it down. If you tighten down one side too fast or the other side, it can cock the clutch, and next thing you know, the clutch gets out of a whack and it's not installed correctly. Another tool that you're going to possibly need is a pilot bearing puller. We've done the bread trick. It doesn't work that great. Just get a proper puller. This one even kind of sucks. It honestly doesn't work that well, but it works. So you need one that has like the very, very small fingers that can get in there and grab that pilot bearing and then expand out and be able to pull it out. So pretty important to have that. Another thing you need is a pilot bearing installation tool. So you can use like a socket that's the right size. We've done that, and you can see we chipped this pilot bearing trying to push it into place. So we got a proper bearing installation tool that holds it much more flush. You can buy kits on Amazon. They're like $100, pretty much worth it. Another tool, this is the rear main seal remover. It looks like a pickaxe. You literally kind of like jab it into that thing and rip it apart and try and get it out. It can take a while. It's a lot of effort, pain in the ass, but this tool does the job. And finally, we have a rear main seal installation tool. So this is also a Hill Engineering part, ST02 100 millimeter seal diameter. It's a good idea to have this. That way you're installing the rear main seal flush and it's not cocked or anything. You don't have to worry about it leaking. These are kind of some of the special tools. Now the last tool you're gonna need, and we're gonna kind of walk through, is the electronic stuff, especially if you're doing an F1 system. So let's pull out the launch computer, plug it into the scud, and I'll show you the clutch readouts and all the different data and kind of give you some idea on what those things mean. All right, YouTube, this is my Launch X431. We're gonna plug it into the computer. We've got my little dongle. So you plug in the dongle into the OBD port down here. Here we go. Okay, and we key on the car. All right, and now we can connect to it on the launch. All right, so we're gonna go into the local diagnose and find Ferrari. Okay. Now, this is a Scuderia, so it's effectively the same, but we do have to go into 430 Scuderia instead of the regular 430. But you have 360, 430, so on. So I don't know that this will work on the 355s. It might not, and it doesn't do everything on the 360. But anyway, this is a pretty good computer. It's about $1,200. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to buy one of them. They're a good device to have. You don't have to necessarily get quite this expensive one. You can get one that's closer to like $1,000 or so and should be able to do most of the stuff that we're talking about right here. All right, so we can see there are two transmission options right here. There's the 301 and the 231. So this is for the F430. The 430, the 231 was made from 05 until half of 2007. The 301 is the second half of 2007 all the way through the end. If you're not sure which one you have, you can go into either one, either module, and you can do read data stream. And then you can click on gearbox model, and it'll tell you this is the 301. What we're gonna do though is we're gonna go into special functions, and you can see here is the clutch wear. So we're gonna click on that. And there you go. So self-calibrated clutch close position, new clutch close position. So it's basically saying when it started, when the clutch was brand new, it was at 20.42 millimeters, and currently it's at 16.61. And clutch wear used, it's saying 67%. Now this is where I personally have a little bit of difficulty with putting a whole lot of weight into that value, because I've seen this number go up and down, and it's varied tremendously with basically no driving. Just to give you an idea, just yesterday or a few days ago, someone asked for a clutch readout on this car, and it was at like 50-something%, and now it's at 67%. And I think the car's, I know, it's kind of bullshit, right? So I don't put a whole lot of weight into what the computer says. And the car only has 10,000 miles on it. So it's basically saying that a 40,000 mile clutch is half worn at 10,000 miles. It should be closer to 25% worn. I don't really put a lot of faith in it. My theory is that the clutches show a lot of wear very fast, and then it flattens out, and then they wear much more slowly towards the end. That's just my theory. 67.89%, yeah, it's kind of BS. We could probably go drive the car and have it change on one drive. All that you really want to do is make sure that it's not at some really wonky number at like negative. We've actually seen negative percentages, so that's probably a bad sign. It means something's not calculating correctly. Potentially something's been put in wrong. I don't know. So these are data points that you can muck with. So again, you can't put a ton of weight into these numbers because all you have to do is go into the computer and tell it some other numbers, and I could get this to read totally different. So if we were to go into the clutch configuration, I could actually, so like here we can read the value. See, that's saying the start value was 20.42. If I wanted to be a jerk, I could be like, hey, we're gonna write 19 millimeters, right? It's saying, oh, look, it's at 19. Look, we go back in the clutch wear. Oh, look at that. It's only at 25% worn. So it's, that's why I'm saying these numbers are stupid. All I'm trying to say is don't put a ton of faith into these numbers. If you use the wrong computer, so if you were to use the 231 on this car, so it was saying 25%. Watch, if we go into the 231 and I read special functions clutch wear, we're gonna get a totally different number. Look at that, 71% used. So you gotta make sure you're using the right computer for the right thing. Otherwise, you're gonna be way off. So this is the system that you can use to read the different values and whatever, but as you can see, don't put a ton of weight into it. Honestly, I think mileage is a better example than the clutch wear and the computer. And of note, this only is on the F1 cars. If you have a manual transmission car, there is no clutch readout. You can't get one. The computer doesn't exist. There is no TCU on a manual transmission car. So if you ask for the clutch readout on a manual transmission car, again, you're gonna look stupid, so don't do that. So as you can see, this is why when people say, oh, the clutch is at like 30% left and Ferrari's saying I need to replace it, please, for the love of God, don't listen to them. Seriously, they're scamming you, especially when the cars have like 10,000 miles. It's just like, it's insane. Like if you took this car to Ferrari, they'd be like, oh, it's at 67% worn, you need a new clutch. It's got 10,000 miles on it. It's a dual disc clutch, it's fine. It's got a ton of life left to it. Save yourself some money, don't replace it right away. As far as what happens if you drive the clutch to the failure point, well, you get stuff like that. You get stuff like that one completely failed. Now, that one wasn't even at the end of its life and it broke. Oh well, I mean, it cost him the same amount of money to replace the clutch after it broke as it would have before it broke, except for now he's gonna have more life on the car because the car made it further on that clutch before it was replaced. As far as when you're converting the car, that is an excellent opportunity to replace the clutch at that time, in my opinion, if the clutch suggests that it's more than about halfway worn. And I'm going more on miles than the computer. Again, you saw how easy it is to muck with the computer and have it show different data. You can't really always trust that. You kind of got to drive the cars and see what they feel like. Now, the thing that we haven't shown is the PIS adjustment. I've done videos on that, so if you want to see how to adjust the PIS, that's something totally different. That's only applicable to F1 cars. It stands for point of initial slip. It's basically where does the clutch start to actually grab? And you can program that in. And it's a very important value, and we've seen, honestly, almost half the 430s and 360s that we get in this shop have that setting wrong. And what happens is it's too loose, and so what happens is the clutch is slipping way too much, and that's how you burn out a clutch sooner. So when people talk about, oh, the F1 system uses clutches and it burns them out so much faster than a manual, that's mostly why, because the PIS setting gets off. It's a setting that as the clutch wears and as the car gets older, you need to readjust it. It needs to be redone a few times throughout the duration of the life of the clutch. So it's not just a one and done. So it's one of those where if you own an F1 car, it's probably a good idea to have a computer, go check the PIS setting, and if it feels right, then note those values and check it every, I don't know, maybe once a year or so. Could take it to a Ferrari dealership, but again, we've seen cars that were brand new clutches replaced by Ferrari, and the PIS was way off. Clutch was slipping like crazy, just behaving poorly. Make sure the PIS is set up correctly, and check out the other videos I've done on the PIS setting if you want to learn how to adjust it. So clutches shouldn't be such a big scary mystery. Yes, they are expensive. No, they're not that big of a deal, but yes, it is expensive when you need to replace them. So factor in somewhere around $7,000 to $10,000 just to replace the clutch. Again, the parts alone can be $3,000 to $5,000 or more, depending on how much you want to do, but you should replace all those components, not just the clutch itself. You really need to replace all those components at the same time. Check on the invoice, make sure that they're doing all of those things, but the labor is going to be probably in the $3,000 range, plus or minus a couple grand. So it could be as many as like $5,000 and as low as like $2,000 is kind of what I'd say. There you have it. Clutches are not so scary. They're not such a big deal. Hopefully you guys learned some stuff. We'll see you guys in the next video. So like, share, and subscribe. We do appreciate you guys' support. Check out normalguysupercar.com. There you can buy parts and services for your car. Check out this sweet ass Capristo that we just got in. Oh yeah, baby. Got a Capristo going in that 360. Woo, yes, we sell those. We do have a discount on the Capristo. So if you want to get a discount on the Capristo, reach out to us, send us an email, sales@normalguysupercar.com. Or if you're interested in buying any cars, check out ngsupercars.com. That is our dealership website. Send us an email, sales@ngsupercars.com, if you'd like to make an offer on any of these cars, except the blue one's sold. Sorry. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. We're going to be doing a lot of cool car stuff. You're going to want to stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.